He was just doing his job, until a single decision changed everything. What would you do if your father was publicly humiliated while the world looked the other way? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe and follow this story to the very end. Walt Jackson's hands never trembled, not during Tet, not during the ambush at Chulai, not the day he buried his wife. But today, as he adjusted his city-issued cap in the grimy mirror of the bus depot's employee lounge, he paused a beat longer than usual. 68 years old, back stiff, knees shot, still waking at 500 sharp. His uniform was always crisp. His eyes always watching. "Morning, Sergeant," said Jamal, one of the younger drivers, offering Walt the same half-joking, half-respectful nickname everyone at the depot used. "Driver Jackson," Walt corrected softly, tucking in his shirt like it mattered, because to him it still did. He moved with quiet precision toward bus 27, like he always did. He didn't smile much, didn't joke around like the others. But his riders noticed he always waited a few seconds longer at stops when seniors approached. He didn't announce it, but everyone on Route 7 knew Walt was the kind of man who remembered the name of your mother, the day of your surgery, the time your son graduated, the kind of man who'd served this city longer than most had lived in it. Nobody knew much about his son. A single photo sat in his wallet, a lean kid in fatigues with sniper tabs and eyes that matched Walt's, sharp and unreadable. But the two hadn't spoken in almost a decade. No one asked why. Walt didn't offer. His day started like every other, that is, until stop 47. The woman stepped on, barely holding herself together, mid-20s hoodie up, baby strapped to her chest in a wrap. She moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. Walt nodded, like always, never asking for fare from struggling mothers. Behind her came the man. White, mid-30s, sweat-streaked polo and aggression in his stride. Loud, already barking. "Hey, don't ignore me, you little—" Walt's voice, calm and sharp, cut the air. "That's enough." The man froze. The whole bus did. Walt didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He stood just enough, one hand on the fare box, eyes locked. "Either you sit quietly, or you don't ride." The man snorted. "You serious, old man?" Walt didn't blink. Dead serious. For a second it looked like there might be a fight, but the man glanced around. The other passengers were watching now, phones out. He muttered something crude and stomped off the bus. Walt shut the door, never breaking eye contact. The young mother exhaled, a whisper of thanks in her eyes. Walt gave a small nod and drove on. At the end of the shift, he didn't mention it to the supervisor. Didn't write it up. Just another day. Just did what was right. But someone had been filming. By the time he clocked out, the video had already started spreading online. By the time he got home to his small brick duplex, the views were in the thousands. By morning, they'd hit 500,000. That's when Officer Brad Murdoch entered the story. Murdoch had a badge, a reputation, and a short fuse. A cop whose father had worn the same uniform, who bragged about being old school and believed that anyone who challenged authority deserved a lesson. Murdoch had seen the video, and he didn't like the optics. A black veteran putting a white man off a city bus. He told himself it was about maintaining order. But in truth it was about control, about punishing the ones who didn't know their place. He pulled up to Walt's address that Friday morning with 2 squad cars behind him and heat in his chest. He didn't bother knocking. Walt opened the door just as Murdoch stepped onto the porch. No fear in his face, just calm confusion. "Something I can help you with, officer?" "Yeah," Murdoch sneered. "You can come with me, now." "For what?" Murdoch didn't answer. He just grabbed Walt by the arm, twisted it hard, and shoved him down the steps like trash. The neighbors shouted, phones were out again, someone screamed. Walt tried to explain, tried to speak, but Murdoch pushed a knee into his back and barked orders like he was taking down a suspect. "You're under arrest for assault and endangering public safety," he said loudly, so everyone could hear. Walt groaned under the weight, not from pain, but from something heavier, deeper, the kind of pain only men who fought in 2 wars know, the kind that doesn't come from violence, but from betrayal. That's when the second phone started ringing. Not in Walt's pocket, but on a satellite phone hundreds of miles away. Caleb Jackson was in the middle of nowhere. Dense pine woods, off-grid, no sound but wind and gunmetal breathing in his palms. The call display showed a city number he hadn't seen in years. He let it ring twice, then picked up. Yeah. A silence. Then it's, "Dad." They took him. Caleb didn't speak. He just closed his eyes, unzipped a bag that hadn't been opened in 5 years, and reached for the scope he once promised he'd never touch again. The roar of a battered diesel engine faded into the pines as Caleb Jackson drove deeper into the backwoods of Montana, the silence swallowing the echoes of gravel beneath his tires. His old F-150, dusty and battle-worn, growled like a tired wolf. Reliable, loud, and low on grace. On the dashboard, next to a chipped photo of him and his father from 2 decades earlier, back when Caleb was just a scrawny ROTC kid barely old enough to shave, sat a folded field map, a rusted Zippo, and a moleskin notebook filled with GPS coordinates, call signs, and names long since crossed out. He hadn't planned to go back. Not ever. Caleb lived by rules shaped in jungles and deserts, whispered in the language of silence and vengeance. He knew how to disappear, how to become a ghost. But the call had cut through years of distance like a bullet through glass. He hadn't heard his father's voice on the line, just a neighbor, shaky and stunned, relaying what had happened on Walt's porch. An arrest, a fall, blood. He didn't resist, she'd said. Didn't even raise his voice, but that cop. He slammed him down like he was nothing. That last part echoed like thunder in Caleb's skull. Like he was nothing. He stared at the photo again, then reached across the seat. His fingers closed around the rifle case. The latches clicked open with a soft metallic snap. And there it was. His old M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Custom-tuned, matte black. Deadlier than memory. He hadn't touched it in years, but every inch of it felt familiar, like a handshake from an old friend. Caleb didn't smile. He just nodded to himself once, slow and resolute. In the distance, snow-dusted peaks loomed like silent judges. He was going back. Meanwhile, 3 states away, Walt sat in a plastic chair inside a city holding cell, his wrists still raw from the zip ties Officer Murdoch had slapped on too tight. His back ached from the way they'd shoved him into the cruiser. His pride stung more than his spine, but he sat straight, even in the dingy fluorescence of the precinct basement, surrounded by peeling paint and the sour stench of bleach. No lawyer had been offered, no phone call was permitted despite the law, and when he asked for one, a bored desk sergeant told him, "Wait your turn, Jackson. You ain't special." Walt didn't reply. He never spoke just to fill the silence. 2 benches away, a drunk mumbled to himself, swaying like a tree in wind. A teenager with bruised knuckles paced back and forth, casting glances toward Walt like he was an alien. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody cared. The charges? Trumped up. Alleged assault against a civilian and non-compliance during detainment. The woman Walt had defended, the young mother, had left before police arrived, baby still clutched to her chest, too scared to stay. She hadn't even been asked for a statement. Walt replayed the moment in his head, not with regret, but analysis. Every movement, every step, like he used to do in training exercises after ambushes. He had de-escalated, that was the truth. But the city didn't want truth. The city wanted quiet compliance. But Walt had never been quiet when it counted. Across town, in the steel and glass fortress of Precinct 21, Captain Ronald Holloway stood at the window of his office, sipping espresso from a monogrammed mug. His suit, perfectly tailored, barely creased as he turned toward the wall-mount monitor displaying muted security footage of the arrest. He watched as Murdoch threw Walt to the pavement. Played it again, rewound it, played it again. He didn't flinch, not once. Behind him, 2 men in charcoal suits waited. They didn't wear badges, but they didn't need to. Their presence said everything. Vanguard Shield operatives, private military contractors with deep pockets and deeper agendas. They worked closely with the city now. Too closely. "He made you look bad," one of the contractors said. Holloway grunted. "He made Murdoch look bad." "Same thing," the second man replied, "and the video's gaining traction, civilian footage. If it gets out of control—" "It won't," Holloway said coldly. "We'll get ahead of it, paint him as volatile, washed up. We'll leak something to the local paper, say he's had episodes before, anger issues, PTSD. Any truth to it?" Holloway turned to face them, gaze sharp. "Doesn't matter." They nodded. "We'll keep our people in place," the contractor said. "If his son finds out, though—" "He won't," Holloway snapped. "Kalen Jackson disappeared, probably dead in some jungle or hiding out in Idaho building bunkers. If he wanted to come back, he would have done it years ago." The contractors exchanged a glance, unsure, but they didn't argue. Back on the outskirts of the city, a familiar name showed up on a facial recognition ping at a small regional airport. TSA staff didn't recognize it at first. The ID was military, outdated. The man using it matched the profile but carried no luggage, no expression. Caleb Jackson walked through security without a word. 2 hours later, Melanie Parker stared at the growing feed of videos and news clippings spreading online. She'd been tipped off by a friend who drove for the city. "You might want to look into this," he'd said, sending her the original cell phone footage from the arrest. The moment Walt was slammed down, his gray hair, catching the light as his cap flew off, had looped in her mind all morning. She remembered Walt. He used to let her ride free when she was just a broke college student hauling home groceries after night classes. Always nodded, never scolded. He once gave her a protein bar when she looked pale. That's who he was. This wasn't a man looking for attention. This was a man who'd been targeted. And Melanie, now a freelance journalist with a small but loyal following online, knew a cover-up when she saw one. She opened a new post. "Veteran arrested after defending mother on bus. Police refused to release footage." The subtitle read, "They didn't know who he was or who his son used to be." She hit publish. The story went viral in under 45 minutes. Inside the holding cell, Walt hadn't moved, but he could feel the shift coming like a barometric drop before a storm. Somewhere, someone had begun pulling strings. He just didn't know how close that storm truly was. Miles away, a blackout SUV idled near a closed auto garage. Caleb sat inside, watching the precinct's layout through a tactical tablet he'd borrowed from an old contact. Rico Alvarado, the city's most brilliant underground mechanic and encryption whiz, had decrypted the internal surveillance feed in under 10 minutes. "They've got your dad in holding," Rico said over comms, "but they're not logging his file. It's off books." "Which means they're planning something," Caleb replied. There was no anger in his voice, just calculation. Rico hesitated. "You really think you can take them all down?" Caleb looked out toward the city skyline, the same streets he once ran through as a teenager, chasing dreams that never quite fit. He saw the precinct, the corruption, the cameras, the silence. "No," he said softly, "but I can start." He opened the passenger seat, grabbed his gear, and disappeared into the night. Caleb moved like smoke. By the time dawn spilled over the skyline, casting long shadows across cracked pavement and hollow-eyed buildings, he was already embedded. 1 block from Precinct 21, tucked inside a vacant rooftop apartment used once upon a time for sniper overwatch drills, Caleb watched the streets below through a high-powered scope mounted to a collapsible tripod. Nothing military issued, everything street-bought and customized, so his signature couldn't be traced. That's how he worked now. Across the street, the precinct was alive, buzzing like a hornet's nest. Police cruisers came and went, officers changed shifts, and the media had begun showing up, feeding off the viral headlines Melanie's article had sparked. The department issued a blanket statement by 8 a.m. calling the incident under investigation and claiming the video lacked necessary context. They declined to release body cam footage. The internet didn't care. Neither did Caleb. He wasn't here for opinions. He was here to dismantle everything from the inside out. His radio earpiece crackled. Still no lawyer? Rico's voice came through, distorted but clear. They're keeping him in processing. No bail. Judge didn't even log his name this morning. It's like your dad doesn't exist. Caleb's jaw flexed. How soon can you access the personnel files? Already did. Took a digital copy of every cop in the precinct. There's some ugly stuff in there. Murdoch's got a long string of complaints, sealed internal memos. 2 misconduct reports resolved without action. Holloway signed off on both. Caleb didn't reply. He already suspected as much. You're really going after Holloway? Rico asked. I mean, he's connected? Not going after him, Caleb said. I'm exposing him. A pause on the line. You're going to need help. I know. Across the city, Melanie Parker was getting more than help. She was getting fire. Her inbox was full. Hundreds of messages from former officers, from locals, from people who'd ridden Walt's bus and swore by his character. Some were just supportive, others held something deeper. Screenshots of private emails, suppressed footage, incident reports scrubbed clean by the Internal Affairs Office. She leaned back in her chair, pushing her hair from her face, staring at a single message flagged red. It was anonymous, sent from a burner account. Subject line, "He's not the only one they silenced." Attached, a shaky cell phone video from last year, an elderly Hispanic veteran dragged from his car in a grocery store lot by the same officer, Murdoch. The video never made headlines. A few people tried, but the coverage died fast. Melanie knew why now. Vanguard Shield, the private military contractor that had quietly moved into municipal operations a few years back. They called it a security partnership. In truth, they were a shield for corrupt cops, for unlawful raids, for government favors disguised as safety. And Captain Holloway, he was their link. Melanie hit record on her microphone. Day 2, she said. Walter Jackson remains in custody. No legal representation, no charges filed. Police deny wrongdoing, but they're hiding something. And I'm going to find out what. At that same moment, Officer Dana Rivas stood at her locker inside Precinct 21, hands trembling as she buttoned her vest. She didn't belong here anymore, not since her transfer from Internal Affairs. They'd buried her in this precinct for digging too deep, made her one of them, just a silencer. She watched Murdoch swagger past, high-fiving another officer, laughing, gloating. He hadn't just broken protocol, he'd broken a man. And he was getting away with it. Again. "Rivas!" a voice barked behind her. She turned. Sergeant Lane, built like a linebacker with the charm of a snapping turtle. "Desk duty. You're covering intake." "Why?" she asked. "'Cause I said so." She knew the real reason. They didn't want her out there. Not now. Not with the media breathing down their necks. But that would be their mistake. Later that evening, while logged into the precinct system, she copied the video files from the arrest. Not just the publicly released ones, but the internal footage. She slid a flash drive into her sleeve and left it under the vending machine behind the break room, exactly where Caleb said to. Rico picked it up an hour later, dressed like a janitor, blending in like vapor. By nightfall, Caleb had everything he needed. Walt was still in holding, untouched but watched. He sat on the same bench, knees stiff, his face unchanged. A deep calm radiated from him, the kind that didn't make noise, but made people nervous. When Rivas checked in on him, she stood just outside the cell, her eyes searching his. "You don't remember me," she said quietly. Walt looked up, calm, deliberate. "No, ma'am. Should I?" "You helped my mom, back in '03. She had a stroke on the bus. You stopped everything, stayed with her until the ambulance came. Didn't even clock out." He blinked slowly, memories stirring. "She was wearing a purple coat." Rivas nodded. Her voice cracked. "I was 17. I never forgot that." He gave a single nod. "You're a good cop?" "I try to be." "Then help me stay calm." That's all he said. Back at his safe house, Caleb watched the precinct feed on split screen. He saw Murdoch walking the halls like a king. He saw Holloway leaving the building with 2 suits and black coats. He saw his father sitting still, like a mountain. It was time to act. Caleb made 5 phone calls in quick succession. To Rico, stage the city blackout. To Melanie, be outside the precinct by 9 p.m. To Dana Rivas, at exactly 9:03, create a diversion in the intake room. Trust me. To an old Army buddy, activate the broadcast channel. We're going live. And lastly, to a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice. Then a woman's voice answered. "Caleb?" He hesitated, his voice softer than usual. "I did." She hadn't heard from him since before the sandbox. Before her father turned into the man he'd become. "I need your help," he said. "Tell me where and when." At precisely 9:03 p.m., the lights in Precinct 21 went out. All of them. Computer systems dropped. Phones cut. The backup generators kicked in, but not before 5 minutes of complete darkness caused full lockdown procedures to fail. That's when Caleb moved. Dressed in black, face covered, body light as breath, he slipped through the staff exit on the west side. Already propped, already waiting, he moved through blind spots like water through cracks. He didn't run. He didn't rush. He just moved. Straight to the holding cells. And within 4 minutes, Walter Jackson stood beside his son for the first time in over a decade. Their eyes met. No words passed. Caleb handed his father a coat. Walt put it on without speaking. "Ready?" Caleb asked. Walt just nodded. They vanished down the side hall as the precinct scrambled. No alarms, no panic. By the time the power came back on, the cell was empty. A single note left on the bench. Written in block print. "You locked up the wrong man. And you let the wrong one come home." The city woke the next morning like it always did, but the air had changed. It wasn't just the weather, though the clouds sat low and gray like a storm deciding whether to stay. It was tension, the kind that buzzed just beneath skin, in every conversation, in every nervous glance at a phone screen. Walter Jackson was gone. No press release, no charges dropped, no lawyer, just gone. The precinct refused to comment. Holloway was conveniently unavailable. Murdoch hadn't shown up to his shift. The official narrative began to crack under pressure. Too many people asking too many questions, too much silence in return. But while the city stared at headlines and tried to make sense of it all, something else was happening. A signal was sent. Not a text, not an email, not a tweet. It was broadcast, shortwave, encrypted, military frequency, reaching ears not meant to hear but trained to listen. To a small radio inside a mobile shop van 2 cities away. To a secure line in a mechanic's bay downtown. To a burner phone in the coat pocket of a homeless vet in Lincoln Park. The signal carried only one word. "Echo." And for a dozen former Green Berets, Rangers, and Marine Recon scattered across the country, it meant one thing. Caleb Jackson was active again. And he had a mission? Back at the safe house, Caleb sat at a folding table surrounded by maps, hard drives, and paper files. Rico manned the secondary terminal, eyes flicking between surveillance cams and data transfers. Every piece of information Dana Rivas had pulled from Precinct 21's system was being cataloged, archived, and prepared for release. "I've mapped every Vanguard Shield transaction connected to city contracts," Rico said, spinning his laptop toward Caleb. "Turns out they're billing the city twice, once for public security, and again through a backdoor Homeland grant they shouldn't even qualify for." Caleb nodded. "And Holloway's signature is on the authorizations?" "Everyone. And Murdoch? His bonus payout last quarter was triple that of any other officer. Want to guess why?" Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Bribes? Or incentives. Same thing, Rico muttered. Caleb reached for his burner phone and dialed. Melanie answered on the first ring. Tell me you've got something. I've got everything. The line went quiet for a second. Can we publish it? Not yet, not all at once, Caleb replied. We trickle it, piece by piece. Every time they deny something, we drop the proof. And Walter? He's safe, Caleb said. For now. Melanie sighed into the phone, emotion barely contained. People are pissed, really pissed. They're organizing protests. College students, vets groups, moms, everyone. But Holloway's not backing down. They won't, Caleb said. Not until we force them into the light. That night, the first leak dropped. An unedited video of Murdoch choking a disabled vet during a traffic stop 6 months earlier. The victim had a prosthetic leg and no criminal record. The body cam footage had been filed under malfunction and buried. Now it was everywhere. News blogs, YouTube, Twitter. The response was immediate. Public outrage boiled. Comment sections flooded. And Holloway issued a shaky press conference the next morning, flanked by 2 Vanguard Shield security men in dark sunglasses. We will conduct a full internal review, he said, lips tight. This city values its veterans and will not tolerate misconduct by any of our officers. However, we urge the public to allow the process to unfold without interference. But Caleb wasn't waiting for process. He was orchestrating exposure. Every 48 hours a new leak appeared. Memos, email, payroll sheets. Holloway's daughter, Nina, now embedded in a college activist group, helped coordinate protests and rallies with disturbing precision. She never said she was involved, but she always seemed to know exactly what Caleb needed. She funneled intel to Melanie. Melanie handed it to the public. The city caught fire. Not literal flames, but energy. It surged. A new voice entered the fight, a war widow named Lorraine Vaughn. Her husband had served with Walt in Vietnam. She went on record in a local interview calling the rest a betrayal of the highest order. Her words struck a chord, and the clip went viral. Soon, people weren't just marching for Walt. They were marching for all the names buried in sealed reports, all the veterans who'd been hurt, silenced, discarded. They marched with signs that read, "You messed with the wrong veteran. Justice for Walter. Free the forgotten." Meanwhile, in a dusty community center on the edge of town, Caleb met quietly with 2 former Vanguard employees. One was an ex-tactical officer, the other a logistics coordinator. Both had been terminated after raising concerns about mission creep. They had files, audio logs, approved. "You understand what happens to us if our names get out?" one of them asked. "I do," Caleb said. "And I'll protect you." He said it like a fact. Not a promise, a certainty. They slid the drives across the table. That night, Rico decrypted them. One folder stood out, labeled Project Oracle. Inside, surveillance blueprints, maps of protest routes, profiles of known activists, predictive threat models. They were planning to infiltrate peaceful protests, Rico said. Stage arrests, control narratives. Using cops? No, Rico replied. Using Vanguard assets in police gear. Caleb stared at the files for a long time. But he sent the documents to Melanie. The article dropped next morning. Private army in police uniforms. Inside the secret plan to crush civilian protests. The mayor demanded answers. The city council scheduled an emergency hearing. Holloway didn't show up to work that day. Murdoch disappeared altogether. And Walt walked quietly into a small church basement surrounded by a dozen vets who had seen the video of his arrest and had come to offer their support. He didn't say much. He just shook hands, nodded, listened. And then, slowly, he began to speak. Not about anger, but about dignity, about what it meant to serve a country that sometimes forgets you, but that doesn't mean you stop serving its people. His voice was calm, but it moved people. Melanie filmed the whole thing. Caleb watched it later that night in silence. Walt hadn't changed. He was still a leader, still that quiet kind of warrior. And that made what Caleb had to do next even more important. "This isn't just about justice anymore," he said to Rico. "It's about legacy." Rico nodded. "So what now?" Caleb checked the time. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. "Now," he said, "we hit them where it hurts." He picked up a remote and activated a program he'd buried into the city's server days ago. One by one, surveillance hubs across the precincts shut down. One by one, encrypted police archives went dark, wiped, rerouted, and replaced with recordings of Walter's speech. Citywide, on every screen. Inside patrol cars, station monitors, substation TVs, even precinct lobby kiosks. And at the bottom of every screen, in stark white text, "He protected us. Now it's our turn to protect him." On one side, silence, fear, the bitter taste of lies unraveling. On the other, fire, voices, a groundswell of justice that refused to go back underground. By 7 a.m., crowds had already formed outside City Hall, spilling into neighboring streets, chanting Walter Jackson's name like it meant something sacred. They didn't have a leader, they didn't need one. Because this wasn't about just one man anymore. This was about what he represented. Inside the mayor's office, a crisis meeting was underway. The mayor, red-faced and sweating through his collar, barked into the phone while advisors scrambled over laptops. "What do you mean the servers are still down?" he snapped. "And why the hell is every public monitor still looping that video?" An aide leaned in, whispering, "They say it's not just the city servers, sir. It's the state archive, too. Someone's routed the police internal servers through a remote proxy we can't trace." "Who the hell is doing this?" "We think it's him, sir." The aide swallowed. "Caleb Jackson." The name landed like a bomb in the room. The mayor sat back, stunned. "You mean the sniper? The Green Beret?" The aide nodded. "Yes, sir, the very one." At that moment, a new email pinged on every device in the room. No sender, no traceable address. Just a video attachment titled, "The Truth They Hid." It played automatically. In the footage, Captain Holloway stood in front of a room full of Vanguard Shield executives, laughing over drinks. "We own this city," he said, voice slurred with ego. "They cry, we profit." "That's the model." The screen cut to Murdoch holding a baton, addressing a room of trainees. "Forget restraint. If they twitch, you drop 'em. Everyone's filming? Good. Let 'em film. That's fear control." Silence followed. Nobody in the mayor's office moved. "Release a statement," the mayor finally said, voice low. "Say we're terminating all Vanguard Shield contracts effective immediately. Call it a reevaluation. And fire Holloway. Publicly, now." The aide nodded, already dialing. But outside, on the streets, that news hadn't reached the people yet, and tensions were hitting a breaking point. At Precinct 21, protesters pressed against barricades, veterans in worn jackets, nurses with handmade signs, students shouting slogans passed down from their parents' fights, all of them united by the footage of an old man being crushed to the ground. Inside the precinct, officers were split. Some leaned against walls, arms folded, jaws clenched. Others stood near windows, watching the crowds, not with disdain, but with shame. Dana Rivas sat at her desk, holding a printed copy of her resignation letter. She hadn't signed it yet. She wanted to, but something kept her here. Then the radio chirped. "All units be advised, mass protest at City Hall, requesting riot control presence from all available units." Dana looked up. Her stomach turned. Murdoch's voice came through the channel. "Let's go show these snowflakes who's still in charge." She stood so fast her chair tipped over. "I need a squad car," she told dispatch. Not your assignment, Rivas. I'm going anyway." She was out the door before they could stop her. 2 miles away, in the shadows of a crumbling church bell tower, Caleb adjusted his scope. He wasn't dressed in tactical black this time, just jeans, a windbreaker, and a mission. The protests at City Hall were swelling. He could see the line forming, police vans moving in, Vanguard SUVs ghosting behind them pretending to be city units. Riot gear, face shields, batons. He tapped his comms. Rico, status? Live feed is running, broadcasting Holloway's confession to every channel. City servers are toast. No command net, no backup. Good, Caleb said. Melanie? Her voice crackled in. Already at the rally, got 5 live streamers feeding to multiple platforms. Dennis' group is organizing a peace ring around the front steps. If anything goes down, the world's gonna see it. Perfect. Caleb exhaled slowly. Then he spotted Murdoch, walking along the protest perimeter with a smug grin, baton in hand. It was time. He didn't need a rifle for this. He needed the truth. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device, shaped like a remote control, wired to Rico's surveillance patch. With a single press, every body cam on every officer in the field activated. Vanguard gear included. Live feed. No way to lie about what happened next. He watched as officers moved forward, forming ranks. Then Nina stepped in front of the crowd, a megaphone in hand, her voice steady. We're not here to fight, we're not here to riot, we're here because an innocent man was brutalized, because veterans are being discarded, because our justice system has turned into a machine that protects abusers. The crowd cheered, loud and strong. Behind her, banners rose. You forgot who he fought for. The system is watching, so are we. Then Murdoch pushed forward. Disperse or be arrested. His voice was raw, angry. Nina stood her ground. This is a peaceful demonstration. Murdoch raised his baton. But this time, someone stepped between him and the crowd. Donna Rivas, her hand on her belt, voice loud enough to stop time. Drop the baton, Murdoch. He froze. You serious? He spat. Dead serious, she said. You're on live feed. Every camera is rolling. This isn't intimidation anymore. It's attempted assault. He sneered. You gonna pull rank on me? No, she said. I'm placing you under arrest. Gasps rippled through the officers behind them. Some reached for their radios. But nobody moved to stop her. Because something had shifted. One by one, officers lowered their shields, stepped back. Murdoch looked around, realizing, too late, he was alone. And behind him the crowd roared. At the same moment, across the city, Walt Jackson sat on the steps of his duplex, watching the whole thing unfold on a tablet that Rico had dropped off hours earlier. He watched his son's face appear in a split-screen broadcast. Caleb didn't speak, but his actions had screamed across every screen in the country. Walt smiled, just slightly. Dan stood. Down the street, a news van idled near the curb. A young reporter spotted Walt and ran over, microphone ready. Mr. Jackson, sir, do you have anything to say? Walt nodded. Yeah, I do. He walked slowly toward the van, standing in front of the camera with the poise of a man who'd faced bullets and bureaucracy alike. He looked straight into the lens. I didn't ask for this attention. I never wanted a spotlight. I just wanted to do my job and treat people right. But the day a man gets punished for standing up for a mother and her child, that's the day we all need to look in the mirror. He paused. I served this country because I believed in its promise, that justice belongs to everyone, that dignity is not negotiable. I didn't break, I didn't run, and now I'm asking this city to do the same. The clip aired live. Millions watched it. And across the country, something shifted. Not overnight, but deeply, permanently. Caleb, still crouched in the bell tower, heard his father's voice echo through the live feed. He didn't cry, but his throat tightened. And for the first time in years, he whispered, You did it, Dad. The truth was out. The people had chosen their side. And for the first time in a long time, the system had been forced to blink. 2 weeks passed, but the echoes of what happened in the city reverberated far beyond the boundaries of its concrete blocks and rusted bridges. The name Walter Jackson became more than a trending headline. It became a movement. The phrase, "Stand tall like Walt," had started as a social media caption and grew into a citywide campaign. Graffiti artists sprayed murals of Walt's face on boarded-up walls. Elementary school kids sent thank-you cards to his address. Churches held candlelight vigils, not just for him, but for all the veterans still waiting to be seen. On the local news, new footage aired daily, interviews with people whose lives Walt had touched without ever knowing it. A teacher who used to ride his bus every morning in high school. A man who, years ago, tried to rob a corner store but changed his mind because Walt saw him walking out with the weapon and simply nodded, like he knew he was better than that. And every time the anchor finished another story, there was a silent pause, a moment to let it sink in. Walter wasn't just a man anymore. He was a mirror, and everyone was staring into it. City Council passed an emergency resolution banning further police contracts with private military firms. Vanguard Shield's license to operate in the city was officially revoked. Federal investigations were underway. Whistleblowers, once silent, came forward in droves, shielded now by community, by public pressure, and by the undeniable evidence broadcast across every device in the country. Captain Holloway had resigned. He didn't do it at a press conference. He did it behind closed doors, forced by the mayor and several state officials who'd flown in unannounced after the footage aired. There was no ceremony, no handshake, just a cold signature and a terse escort out of the building. Murdoch was in custody. Formal charges filed: aggravated assault, civil rights violations, tampering with evidence. His lawyer tried to plead down the case, but the city wasn't buying it, not this time. The DA, once hesitant to challenge anyone connected to Holloway, now stood firmly with the people. Her office had changed too, and Dana Rivas was officially reinstated, promoted, and reassigned to lead the precinct's newly formed Civil Accountability Unit. She didn't smile much when it was announced. But later, when she visited Walt's home with flowers and a sealed commendation envelope, she sat beside him on the porch and said, "You reminded me why I put this badge on." He nodded. "I knew that already," he said. The two of them sat there in companionable quiet, the kind that comes only after fire has passed and the smoke has begun to clear. Caleb watched from across the street, his arms folded, eyes soft. He hadn't gone back into hiding, not yet. But he didn't stay still either. That wasn't in him. He had become something else now. Not just a ghost. Not just a weapon. He had become a guide. He trained Inez Group in nonviolent resistance techniques, counter-surveillance strategies, and peaceful demonstration protocols. He built connections with veterans organizations, security experts, and journalists. And he never stopped watching. When he and Walt finally sat together alone, there was no dramatic reunion. Just a small wooden table on Walt's back patio, 2 mugs of black coffee, the sun warming their faces, and silence. Until Caleb finally broke it. "I should have come back sooner." Walt took a sip of coffee, then a breath. "I wasn't ready to see you until you were ready to come back. I thought I had to protect you by staying away." "You did," Walt said without a hint of resentment. "But then you realized protecting someone doesn't always mean disappearing. Sometimes it means standing beside them, even if you're still figuring out who you are." Caleb looked away, blinking hard. Walt leaned forward. "You know what I saw the day you left for selection training?" "What?" "A boy carrying the weight of men who hadn't earned it." Caleb met his father's eyes. "And now I see a man who finally gave that weight back to the people who should have carried it all along." Caleb's hands trembled slightly on the mug. Walt reached across the table and put his weathered palm over his son's. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I always was." Caleb didn't speak, but his grip tightened just enough to say what words never could. Later that week, a citywide Veteran Appreciation Day was held, unplanned, unbudgeted, but unstoppable. Local business owners volunteered space. School bands played in unison from different districts. Children sang the national anthem in front of murals depicting veterans of all backgrounds, all eras. Walter Jackson was the honorary Grand Marshal. He didn't want a parade, but they gave him one anyway. Not with floats or confetti, but with rows of people standing, saluting, cheering, with hands on hearts and tears in eyes. With silence when he passed, not because they were told to, but because they felt it. He wore his old bus driver's jacket, not his uniform, not his medals. And when someone asked why, he said, "Because the job I did after the war taught me more about this country than the war ever did." Melanie Parker aired a follow-up documentary, The Stand, charting the entire sequence of events from the moment Walt told that man to get off his bus all the way to the systemic reckoning that followed. It garnered national attention, awards. More importantly, it inspired legislation in neighboring cities to audit their own private security contracts. Dana went on to co-author a book about youth-led community justice movements. Dana helped create an internal police curriculum now taught to every new recruit in the city. And Rico? Rico was hired by the city's new independent tech ethics board. He never stopped wearing oil-stained overalls, but now he wore a badge that said Systems Watchdog. He loved the irony. As for Caleb, he left again, but this time he left with purpose. Not to run, not to hide, but to teach. He began hosting covert seminars for veterans struggling to reintegrate, teaching them tactical discipline not for combat, but for survival in a world that often failed them. And every once in a while a letter would show up in Walt's mailbox. No return address, no name. Just a single line. Still watching, still with you. Walt never needed more than that, because he knew. And for the first time in a long time he could sleep without locking the deadbolt, without keeping his boots beside the bed, without bracing for the world to take something from him again. He had already given enough. And finally, the world gave something back.